Good evening and welcome into another edition of Trailblazers Courtside. Jordan Kent joined alongside Michael Holton and Trailblazers head coach Terry Stotts. And coach, let's just dive right into this one. 99-98 victory over the Spurs, and a lot of people, the broadcasters we're working with, people walking through the concourse, said it was just a really fun game. What was your takeaway from being able to coach in a game like that where you don't have your typical lineup and you see the type of effort you saw from your guys?
I thought it was a fun game. It really was. I think, both teams, obviously, there wasn't a lot of pressure on to win or lose. Both teams were competing. San Antonio played their bench guys in the fourth quarter. They got their starters a little bit of a run. They played about 20 minutes. But I was really pleased with the way we came out to start the game. I think that surprised a lot of people that we came out and made some shots and took an early lead. We won the first quarter. And like I said after the game, I was really happy for guys like Shabazz and Pat Connaughton and Jake Layman, who don't get a chance to play much. Tim Quarterman, who had been in the D-League. Those guys got a chance to be out there in a game, and to pull off the win made it that much better.
When you look at some other players that are more so in the middle of the rotation, when you look at a Myers Leonard or Evan Turner, Noah Vonleh going out there, what's the value of this type of game for them as far as going out there and being the leaders on the court with those other players you had mentioned?
I don't know necessarily about being the leader. I think obviously they played more minutes than they usually do. I think that was good from a physical standpoint. A guy like Noah, who's still a young player, it gave him some valuable experience to playing extended minutes. Evan's played extended minutes before in his career, so has Farouk. So I think Farouk and Evan, it was just more of a chance to get a good game in, and Evan probably was a little bit more assertive offensively. I thought Farouk played his normal game, but for me, it was just about maintaining their edge for that game.
You talk about those players maintaining an edge, and as a team that's clinched a playoff spot with still a couple regular season games to go as you guys were getting set for San Antonio, how do teams balance rhythm versus rest as you prepare for the playoffs?
I think everybody has their own thoughts on it, and I don't know if there's a right answer, wrong answer. I think it depends on your team, age of your team, the rhythm your team is in, and just a feel. I do think that players do like to have a rhythm, but the rest is invaluable. And you look at an all-star break where you have a week off, and sometimes people show a little bit of rust after that week. Like in our case, the rest did us pretty good. So I don't know if there's a right answer. Giving Damian, CJ, and Mo some rest last night, I think it was good, and I think that'll help us down the stretch.
Coach, there was a part of them getting rest last night that felt like a college game to me, and watching the emotions and the excitement, because it's really unique for Dame and CJ and Allen Crabbe to be able to cheer for the other guys when they get an opportunity. Is that something as a coach or as a coaching staff that you pay any attention to? Is it any benefit in that or any enjoyment in that part of it?
The games that Damian has missed in his career, he has always been involved. He's sat right behind the bench. Last night he was in game uniform, but he was still very much in the thick. And that's what Damian does when he misses games. But I do think it really helps the camaraderie of the team. And it's been built up over months that when they have an opportunity to cheer on their teammates, they were great. The guys who normally play were in the huddles. They were talking to the teammates. And when you have a moment like you did at the end of the game and to win a game and allows them to cheer for those guys, it was a special night.
Yeah, it definitely was, Coach, and I think everybody in the building and that watched it felt that. Watching the execution last night was interesting. I mean, obviously there's different personnel on the floor, so you see different skill sets on display. But I wanted to specifically ask you about the screening game. On the ball and off the ball, we focus a lot on your on-ball screening game because the NBA is an on-ball screening league, so you think.
Right.
But it looks like a lot of your offensive effectiveness is coming with off-ball screens, whether they're flares or on the baseline.
Well, we try and change it up. Obviously, Damian and CJ are very good with the ball in pick and rolls, and that's a good part of our offense. But as CJ will let you know, he's run more miles in the NBA this season than any player, and a lot of that is off-ball screening and a lot of movement off-ball, flares and pin downs and curls and things like that. So we try and incorporate that for AC not so much Damian, but CJ. I think you saw it last night. I thought Pat Connaughton did a nice job of catching the ball on the move and taking the ball to the basket. Jake Layman had some shots he didn't make, but he had some good looks because of that movement. So what I try and do, and what we try and do, is incorporate, have a little bit of everything. We don't have much of a post game. Obviously, Yusuf changes that, but pick and roll, on ball and off ball screens are very important. And we've spent a lot of time. Our coaching staff has spent a lot of time with our players in learning how to use flares and pin downs and curls and fades and all that, so that they become more effective.
And then, Coach, on the defensive end, the energy last night, I mean, you could obviously see it, but it wasn't unique to last night. Your team's defensive energy and positioning as of late has been, I think, really good. But the points off turnovers seem to be now increasing or more consistent.
Well, points off turnovers, I think, on the stat sheet is a little bit misleading because, you know, if you have a 3-second call, that's a turnover, and then you take the ball out of bounds, and if you score, that's a points off turnover. So for me, it's nice to force turnovers, but an offensive foul is a turnover, but it's a dead ball turnover. I would like to get better at converting in those situations where we get a turnover and now we're going 3-on-2, 2-on-1, 3-on-1, whatever it is, and be able to convert those situations. Because I think in the last few games we've had a number of those opportunities that we haven't converted on.
When you talk about those reads in transition, when you've got a 3-on-2 or 2-on-1, what are you instructing your players as far as the read to make? Because I think a lot of us that play at the more elementary level, it's just pass and try to get a layup. But what are you guys looking for in terms of a quality shot in those situations?
Well, the league's changed a little bit. You know, you look at a team like Golden State, they just run in the three-point line, and they get a good shot, and it's at three-point line. So it's not to say that that's not a bad thing if you got Klay Thompson shooting an open three in transition. I think the timing of the pass, the spacing, if it's I think there's always the discussion of make the defender commit to something, you know, whether it's you with the ball. Sometimes I've heard other people talk about making a 3-on-1, making a 2-on-1, and having the third guy kind of trail back a little bit and make that defender decide on one of the two and have them come in. But it's a bang-bang play. It's very fast, so it requires I don't know if it's necessarily something that you taught or you just learn over time, that it's a quick reaction, a quick read. The defender, you have to kind of read what he's doing, what he's thinking. I think back a game ago or a game or two ago where Damian had it and he passed it to Chief a little bit too early, and Chief got a charge and it was a 3-on-1. You know, that's just a matter of, okay, when do you give it to Chief, or do you give it to Chief, or you make that defender come over and guard you first, or do you skip it? It's just, there are a lot of possibilities, and we just got to be better at reading those situations.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
You know, I was just thinking of Sebastian Napier having the lob to Jake Layman. You probably don't work on that in practice.
No, that's instinct. That's basketball. And you know what? That was a 2-on-1. It was well executed, and you could see it developing, and Shabazz made the right read, and actually Jake gave it up early. And one of the things for all you young guys, if you want to learn, if you want to score, if you give it up early, you'll probably get it back. So that's something to remember as well.
Yeah, we had a chance to talk with Nate Tibbetts last week, and the lineups that you guys are having to use over the last couple games with no Yusuf Nurkic in the lineup, and he was talking about how Chief and Mo had to slide down a position. And when you get to especially half-court action, you're using those pick-and-roll situations. How have they had to adapt to maybe playing the 4 and the 5 as opposed to the 3 and the 4?
You know, it's probably more important when you're playing more of random, not set plays. If you're playing in flow, and so now you have to make reads. If Mo is, you know, Mo is usually a 3-man, and he doesn't get involved in ball screens very much, and he's more spacing, and you've got either Yusuf or Myers or Noah out there, and so he's spacing. Now, as a 4-man, he needs to be involved in ball screens more often. When you have two players like Farouk and Mo at 4 and 5 who are used to spacing, you need somebody to roll, or you need somebody to work the baseline and occupy somebody by the basket. And that comes more in the flow of the game rather than set plays. We can call all our plays, and both those guys are going to know the plays from the 4 and the 5. But it's the other part, more the intangible part of the game, that takes more reading.
All right, sit tight. When we come back, we'll have more with head coach Terry Stotts as Trailblazers Courtside rolls along. Jordan Kent alongside Michael Holton and head coach Terry Stotts. And Coach, you had mentioned earlier how some teams during the All-Star break, they bounce back, they play even better, and I think you guys were one of the best examples in the league this season. On the outside, a lot of people point to Nurkic, they point to Dame playing so well in March, but in your experience, what you witnessed, what was it about the team that you saw really transpire over the last couple weeks of the season?
Well, I think the two obvious things, obviously, are Damian and Yusuf. They both had a tremendous impact on the team. And you're going to make an argument that Damian played the best basketball of his NBA career after the All-Star break. Yusuf came in and made a big difference. There was some trepidation about losing Mason and what he brought to the table, and we all valued what he brought. But I think Yusuf brought a few things and made a difference. On top of that, I thought Farouk got healthy and played very good basketball. I thought Alan Crabb had a very good run during that stretch. Mo Harkless, I think Evan Turner got hurt, but everybody was feeling comfortable with what he was doing. I think it all kind of came together, but it was certainly triggered by Damian and Yusuf.
And you mentioned the other night against Utah, the victory here at the Moda Center, one of the most impressive games you saw from this team the entire season. When you look at that, what was it about your team's defensive effort against Utah that really stood out to you when you had a chance to recap that?
You know, I think more than anything else, we were, you talk about this as a coach, every possession staying focused. We didn't give up anything easy. I shouldn't say anything. We didn't give up very much easy, whether it's back doors or transition or offensive rebounds or just wide open looks. I thought we were pretty intent on what we were doing. Our switching was very effective. I thought Noah Vonleh did a good job of switching. I thought Evan and Mo did a nice job with Gordon Hayward. But in this league, you got to make teams work for it. And Utah is a methodical team, and much like San Antonio, if you let your guard down, they're going to take advantage of it. And it really tests your focus and the extent of your focus throughout a possession, throughout a quarter, and throughout a game. And I thought we did a really good job in all those areas.
You mentioned Noah Vonleh being able to switch, and can you speak a little bit about his athleticism at the 5 spot? Because as we're watching this game, there's a lot of times where teams will try to take him off the pick and roll, but he's so athletic he can stay in front of most ball handlers, and as you said, it's making things difficult for opposing teams.
I think Noah's getting much more comfortable with that assignment, and he's done it with his length. He's deceptively long. He has a wingspan. He gets down into a stance. But I think it's just the experience of understanding what he is able to do, and I think you've seen it over the past 4 to 8 weeks how much better he is getting at guarding people on the perimeter and understanding your job is just to keep him in front. He has the athleticism and length to do that, and then challenge shots. And he's growing as a defender.
Coach, you talk about defense, and one of the important things about coming together as a team defensively is understanding and trusting your teammates and learning their tendencies. How challenging is that down the stretch of an NBA season when some guys aren't available or you don't have a lot of practice time? Because to me, it's easier to learn offensive tendencies of guys. You play with them year round. But is it more difficult to learn and develop trust defensively?
Yeah, you have one thing about defense, you have your individual assignment. You have to know who you're guarding, what you're doing on pick and rolls, if you're guarding him out on isolation, what tendency he has. But there's also the team aspect of it and how much to help and who you can help off of. And if a guy does drive baseline and you help, who's going with him. So these are things that we work on all year, and you'd like to think that, that there's carryover with that, both individually and collectively.
When you start to look at your first round matchup against Golden State, we hear you take things a game at a time, but where are you at in the preparation for that? How does that typically work for a team when you have clinched and you already know who your opponent's going to be with a couple regular season games remaining?
Well, the good thing for us was that we knew that if we were in the playoffs, if we were going to make the playoffs, we were going to play Golden State. So we were able to kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit. I mean, you look at in the Eastern Conference right now, and no matchup is set. So, which is actually kind of the norm for a lot. Every matchup is set in the West, but a lot of times at this time, going in the last game of the season, you're preparing for 2 or 3 teams. But we've had the benefit of knowing that we're going to play Golden State if we got in. So our scouts have been focused on that. Our video department has been putting together different edits and personnel and sets, and so we've been able to get ahead so that when we deliver all the information to our players and the coaches on Thursday, we'll have a good idea of what we want to do. And like I said, it gave us a little bit of an advantage, but not just us. Every team. Obviously, Golden State didn't know if they were going to play Denver or Denver or us, but still they were able to focus on a couple teams and get ahead so that when playoff time came, they were ready.
Coach, when you talk about presenting information or the scouting report in a playoff series, how different is that than in a regular season game, and how important is it to balance not overemphasizing what they do and focusing on what you do?
That's a good point, because in this day and age, there's so much information out there, and it's important that the players understand, the things that they need to know. They need to know personnel and tendencies, and they need to know their top 10, 15, 20 sets. They need to know the priorities, but we don't want to inundate them with too much overload. Each player will have an iPad. They will be able to access as much information as they want, both written and video, and we will present certain things on the court and in the film room and things like that. But I think it's important for the coaches to know as much as they can know, and I think it's important to kind of piecemeal it out with the players and kind of prioritize what they need to know right now and what's a priority. And then ironically is you build up to game one with all this information, and then by game two you're really focused on what happened in game one. So it's really sometimes you do go back a little bit on your preparation before game one, but once you get to game two and game three, you're really kind of locked into whatever games you've played in the playoffs.
And was that the case for you guys last year? Because you obviously played Golden State in the regular season, then you get to the playoffs. What was your experience as far as the difference during contesting them in the regular season versus the playoffs?
Well, you use, personally, I like using the games that we played against them during the regular season. Unfortunately, I think games that are played in November and December are a little difficult to extrapolate anything out of. But I think for this series, watching their last two games against Utah and I can't remember whether it was New Orleans. Those are the two games that Durant was back for. So those two games are very important, along with the games that we played them.
And as you look at what you guys try to do, is there anything that you might try to work on against, say, New Orleans in the final regular season games? If there's anything that you're going to try and focus against Golden State, or is it really just you're keying in on what you guys need to do based upon the information you have with Golden State?
I don't know how much, what we'll do against New Orleans that would compare to Golden State. Golden State, first of all, is a very unique team, and I don't know if there's another team that you could play that would be comparable to Golden State and how they play. But, you look at a game like last night, San Antonio played, I don't know how many possessions of zone in the first half, probably 15 possessions of zone, and they were probably preparing themselves for something that they would use in the playoffs at some point. So there are certainly times that you can use these games in preparation for the playoffs. I'm not so sure that tomorrow night will be one of those opportunities for us.
We had a chance to speak with Damian Lillard, and we've also heard him say that getting this team into the playoffs after the adversity that the team faced this season was one of the biggest accomplishments of his career. Did you get that sense from him as far as how much this meant to him to get things turned around since the All-Star break and find yourself in the position that you are now, a game above 500?
Probably not at the time. I knew how he played. It was pretty evident. Dame is a very serious guy, and he really is a competitor, and he wants to win. He shoulders a lot of responsibility. I thought what he did last season for us was a huge accomplishment for him to do what we did, particularly the second half of the season. But this year was a little more of a struggle than last year. Last year we had expectations. Last year we didn't have expectations. This year we did, and it weighed on everybody. And I think the way he carried us since All-Star break, certainly it probably was his biggest accomplishment.
Well, Coach, we really appreciate you stopping by, and we obviously wish you best of luck against New Orleans, but best of luck in the playoffs as well, too, and we look forward to watching it.
Thanks for having me. It's always enjoyable.